Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Volpe Bazzo Report. This is October 3rd. Year is running close to the end faster than we thought. Next month's show will be taped the day after Election Day, so we'll have all the final results for you. Now, Dominic and Darren are in Florida having their Mai Tais, so it's me and our editor of the Peekskill Post, publisher, the guy that cleans the restrooms, Brian Fumagalli, and our special guest today, the Peekskill Mayor, Frank Catalina.
Doing
good. Now, there's a couple things I wanted, because I was not here last month, and it seems that they were remiss. First of all, a shout out to our number one fan, Marianne McCara. Hello, how are you? And we've been following your posts on Facebook, and the kids are getting big. Number two, the lady that puts our shows on YouTube, Brian's better half, Christine, who gets hot watching the shows. Okay. And pretty soon we're going to have the announcement that she's pregnant again, and this show will
Not if she's watching this show.
This show will be the foreplay.
Okay.
And now, Frank, this is the playoff game, Yankees, Minnesota. How long have you been a Minnesota fan?
Never.
Oh, just checking. Now, you know that Brian is a Met fan.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Brian is actually a Met fan, and so the world has come the way. Last year, the Mets made the playoffs, the Yankees didn't.
And we went to the World Series 2 years ago.
I know, but the Yankees at least had a playoff game. But last year, the Mets were in a playoff, the Yankees, and the world had gone to hell for a year. Now it's righted itself, and the Mets are in the oblivion that they belong in, the Yankees are in a playoff game tonight against Minnesota. Wow. Are you a Yankee fan? Seriously, we've never talked sports in all the conversations.
Aaron Judge, he's amazing.
Can you believe this? 52 home runs?
Yeah.
He has 5 rookie records.
Yep, and he's getting paid. I know he's young, but he's getting paid $500,000. He and Sanchez both.
So
that's going to be a big pay.
Oh yeah, sure will.
Well, who knows? But I'll tell you, I'm just glad he is not another Shane Spencer. I was very happy to see that. And anybody that's
Remember
an old Yankee
Kevin
fan,
Moss?
Or a Kevin Moss.
Yes.
That Judge just, because he had that slump, and everybody was saying Kevin Moss, Shane Spencer, but I don't know what he did, but he righted himself. And that's the sign of a good ball player. Because they all
he did it in September, too, when it counted.
Right, they all get slumps, but he righted himself out of it. And
it's kind of like me in politics. You know, you're new on the scene, they don't know how to handle you, so you get rookie success. And then you go through a little doldrums for a couple of months because they got your act down. And then you have to adjust, and you start getting great success. Project after project, legislation after legislation, and they really don't know how to react.
So since Catalina was on the scene before Judge, it's safe to say that Aaron Judge is the Frank Catalina of baseball.
That could be true.
I don't know.
you know they're going to break your balls down in every bar you walk into because you just said something nice about Frank, and so now all the Democrats are going to write hate mail about you now.
Yes.
I hope you understand that. Now, anyway, but
Thanks.
Seriously, Frank, I've said this before.
Well, after that cakewalk that he gave Ramon Fernandez,
See?
I don't know how they can be mad at him.
Okay, now, that I didn't understand. I didn't understand that at all.
Well, give some context. Who was Ramon Fernandez?
Number one, I wanted Ramon Fernandez
He's a Democrat running for council.
Yes, but
he's part of the opposition ticket to Catalina's
He was on the last show, and I wanted him there because, number one, we're both in the same industry. And he's genuinely a nice human being.
You're both in the taxi industry.
Right,
you and
we're
Ramon.
both in and he's genuinely a nice human being. And
I supported him in his run for school board when the Democrats defeated him.
Yes, you did. I'm saying he's somebody that if he did win, you could work with. But also the fact...
It's not going to happen.
I said if. But
if I had wheels, I'd be a bus.
Yes, this is true, but what I'm trying to say is I believed that maybe it was time to have, because you guys make taxi regulation, that maybe somebody should sit on the council that actually rides it.
Ramon Fernandez came to me and said he wanted the requirement that you had to read English lifted because it had nothing to do. And I went to bat for him.
Yes, you did.
And the Democrats on the council. I took a lot of heat from guys like you and the county. But I went to bat for Ramon Fernandez because he came up with something that made sense. And the Democrats on the council defeated him twice. And I guess he forgot about that. But politics makes strange bedfellows, I guess.
But what I was trying to get at is that I thought somebody that actually rode in a taxi should be on the board. And because right now there was an issue I came before the board on about a month ago. Some nice lady was nice enough to record it and put it online. And last time I counted, it had 1,000 views. So obviously it interested people about we pay $335 for the license for the car itself. Then we have to pay another $185 for our taxi license, plus a doctor's fee for a physical, fingerprint, and a background check, and a drug test. And we have to pay all this money.
Is the drug test once a year or just the beginning, or how often is the drug
Every
test?
time we renew our license.
So once a year? Is that
Yeah,
the
that's
rule?
once a year.
Okay.
The cab thing is twice a year. Okay? But what I'm saying is that we're very regulated. And it costs us a lot of money to go into this industry. And now you have other entities that drive people, with paid drivers to drive people, that were parking next to our taxi stands. And they're not paying what we pay, but they're competing against us. So I came to the board and I said, move them 500 feet away. It's still visible from the platform. We're not telling people you can't ride with them, because even I said in public, I'm not going to tell people who you could ride with. But you had to give our license some meaning. You're charging us this money, you got to give it meaning. And I thought it was a good argument. I talked to other members of the council, they agreed. But then I haven't heard a thing about it. Now I know you got a budget coming up and all this. Is this thing going to get kicked down the road, or
the issues that you bring up are legitimate, and I think they're waiting for the chief to weigh in on it. But I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. But it takes 4 to do anything there. So, but you could count on my support for something like reasonable.
I think I had the 4 that even with you, I had the 4. I didn't think I didn't, but the idea is that if it disappears into the woodwork. And because you got other entities coming, you got WC coming in, because our laws now match WC.
Right.
So, but is WC Westchester County?
Yes.
Okay.
But they don't have the medallion, which allows us in the but we match them now.
Right.
So we can go to the airport and the hospital. Then you have Uber and Lyft. And then you have these private other entities. You have like Riverbend, you have a bid shuttle, you have a few shuttles. Not just one. So it was trying to encompass anybody that had a paid driver from parking next to us.
What have other cities done about this? Austining, for instance.
Austining doesn't even have the WC regulations because they're not as strong. Peaksville is the only one that doesn't need a WC ticket to work WC territory, like the airports and the hospital. Because we only had 2 regulations we were missing to match WC, and they were minor. They were just minor. They were cosmetic.
Right.
Well, our laws were actually stronger than WC because we're twice a year. But what I'm saying, so you think that we have a good chance of getting this done, or do you think it's going to fall into the rat hole of
I think you have a good chance of getting it done.
Thank you. That's all. So, now, I was reading in the Examiner today.
Yes, sir.
Your budget proposal, relatively minor tax increase.
Well, actually, no tax increase at all if you take away the pension deferrals of the 2012, 13, and 14.
Would you like to explain to it, not just me,
Sure.
because I don't know what it means at all, but to our audience what that means?
As part of the budget, you have to pay employees, you have to pay their medical, and you have to make pension contributions
Yes.
to the state. In 2012, 13, and 14, over $4 million was not paid because of the tightness of those budgets and the refusal of that prior administration to raise taxes to pay for the services that the people wanted. So they deferred over about $4.2 million.
I remember that, yeah.
Under a state law that was enacted during the recession, they allowed you to do that, but it has to be repaid in 10 years, over a 10-year period in equal installments. So our payment every year is about 2% of a 2% tax increase. So we can look forward to a 2% tax increase just to pay that every year for the next 7 years.
So you're still cleaning up the mess from the previous administration?
That's one way of looking at it.
How does that factor in with the overall tax levy?
How else would you look at it?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be called political, but
Oh, please stop.
it's a mess.
Stop. The
It's
fact
one of
is-
it's one of the many messes that we have cleaned up, and I'm not complaining about it. But when people say, "Oh, you raised taxes 2% or 3%," or listen, taxes
5.9%.
5.9% was the city manager's budget.
Right.
Nobody voted for that. I
Right.
certainly didn't
I
vote
remember.
for it. And I can tell you the story about that if you really want to know. We were sitting.
Sure,
we sat along, and we had just come out of an election where Kathy Talbot and Vivian McKenzie
They made
had-
promises
and
about
Rainey
things.
had said they would not exceed the tax cap.
Right.
So when we got to the budget, when we couldn't bring that levy down to the 2% that it was going to be, the vote failed, and we were stuck with the city manager's budget. Then we took a recess, and go and watch the tape. We took a recess. We were out in the hall in my office. Everybody agreed. I said, we will jump off the cliff if we all jump off the cliff holding hands together. That was the deal. We were all going to come out and vote for the 3.9% budget tax, the 3.9% increase. That was the modified budget. So we all came out, and just thank God the Republicans have the last names Torres, Vesey, and the mayor goes last.
Right.
So the 4 Democrats go first. And of course, notwithstanding the handshake representation, the liars voted against the budget. That's Talbot and McKenzie. And listen, they can shape it any way they want to. The fact of the matter is that they voted for it the next night in an illegal meeting. But when we all would have voted for it together, when they said no, we were free to vote
See,
no or
this is what
abstain.
bothers me, because I know Robert Sullivan, and I've always thought he got a bad rap. Oh, he went to court, he got our taxes raised. I'm saying no, the fault lies with the people that broke the law. I mean, the rule of law has to mean something. I know you're a lawyer, so the law means a lot to you, and Bob's a lawyer in the law. But as a private citizen, as a columnist, as whatever you want, the rule of law has to stand for something. And just because it doesn't benefit you doesn't mean the rule of law, then you change the law.
It wasn't.
But they didn't change the law.
You're absolutely right. The rule of law means something. We all take an oath to uphold the law and the
That's
charter
the
of the city of
thing.
Peekskill. But what really got Bob Sullivan, who I didn't know at the time, got him off his couch and really ticked him off was when Vivian McKenzie, in an arrogant way, looked in the TV camera and said, "If you don't like it, sue me."
So
Like
he
the
did.
ends justify the means. And you know something? I'm glad somebody took her up on her offer. He sued the city. He paid for his own time as a lawyer. He paid for the filing fees, and he represented himself.
But I find this indicative to Democrat DNA. It's never their fault. They are not to be held accountable for their actions. It's somebody else's fault. When it's the reactor's fault to their action. Oh, whatever went wrong is their fault. It's not your fault for causing that reaction. You did this. You get just this Las Vegas shooting. They're trying to find out what made this guy do it. And they're looking for a scapegoat. This guy, whatever reason it was, is immaterial that he did it. And it certainly wasn't the NRA, because the man bought an illegal gun. I'm trying to figure out what law they could have passed now
Well, it's interesting. 'cause
that would have stopped that, let alone the laws that were already on the books, and he still got the weapon.
Congresswoman Lowy sent out an email yesterday, a press release about it, expressing her condolences and her sadness and prayers and everything, but then also said it's time for Congress to act on gun legislation. And so I replied, and I sent an email to her aide, and I said to him, is she going to introduce anything, and would it have had any effect on this? And he said he plans to Congresswoman Lowy plans to reintroduce legislation that she introduced prior that would have prevented one of the church shootings about 4 or 5 years ago. That was his way of saying it would have no effect on what took place in Las
or
Vegas.
Sandy Hook or anything.
Right.
I'm getting off track and I'm digressing, and I'm sorry. I want to go back to the budget. I thought going into an election year that like I said, you explained why it's a 2% or 2 point whatever it is.
2.3.
But the fact is, you're also going to hire another policeman and another fireman. Now, this was all the way at the bottom of this story. Yet I think it should be more brought closer to the top because everybody says we need more of this and we need more of that, but they don't want to pay for it. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to do it. But here you got a budget with an increase that is mandated by a debt that the city owes, not because you're increasing the payroll to the city.
Yes.
How did you do it? How did you wind up getting the money for 2 new people to protect the citizen, and especially now that you got the new firehouse? My God, it's amazing how that construction is going so fast on that. But we'll do that in a second. But you're getting a new cop and a new fireman. How'd you do it? Or how did you guys
and a new laborer at DPW.
Okay, that wasn't even in the story.
We got it by
so what do you got now coming?
2 words: private investment in Peekskill. We've expanded the tax base even more than I thought we could in the 4 years that I've been in office. In the 7 years before I took office, the tax base, the total assessed valuation, shrunk for 7 years in a row. You have to grow 2 to 4% every year just to stay current with your expenses. And that meant that every year you had to pay more just to stay even. And of course, the Foster administration did not pay more. They deferred obligations. They bonded things like police cars that we would pay off over a 5-year period, fire trucks, deferred pensions that we're paying now. But those regular, bonding went from, think of a bond as your mortgage on your house. A total of $18 million obligation that the city owed for all bonding went to about $42 million at the end of Mary Foster's term. And we're paying back those bonds. Now, to be fair, about 15 or 20 million of that was for a new water filter plant. But a lot of that was she would bond to pay off litigation costs, to settle tax certiorari cases, and all of those things that we pay year to year, pay as you go. The city of Peekskill was bonded to death. Our finances were, and it was an $18.2 million in total deficits over a 6-year period. That means there was an average of $3 million a year in deficit spending, and our budget's about $32 million. So it would have to be a 10% tax increase just to pay those deficits. And how did she do it? Testa left an $11.2 million fund balance. They dipped into it and paid part of that $18 million was soaked up by that $11.2 million fund balance, because when I took office, we had $7,500. We couldn't even buy snow tires for our fire trucks with $7,500. And the rest of it was bond. So that's how they funded that deficit, left the city in terrible shape, about 60 days away from being taken over by a financial monitor.
Now, there was something in the story you could explain, that the state moved up, you're no longer in distress. Yeah. What does that mean? Because obviously it was a good, again, all the things that were nice for you were at the end of the story.
Well, so we expect that with a hostile press.
That's not my article.
No, it wasn't. No, I said this was the Examiner. I told you where this was. So tell the people what this means, that that they don't consider you in distress.
Well, during the recession, around 2012, the State Controller's Office set up this kind of like a report card for municipalities.
Right.
It's kind of like a warning sign, like, you got a bad grade, you better start shaping up on your raises for employees, watch this spending, watch that spending, watch your bonding. And it's basically a report card. And based upon that report card, if you were doing poorly, the higher your score, the worse you were off. And if you hit 40 or 45, I think the number was, then a financial monitor would come down from Albany and take over your finances. The lower your score, the better you were. Well, they made such a big deal over it. When Mary Foster went from in the 20s to 32.3, low 30s when I took office, that was, it was a gimmick. It was no big deal, that score. But I'm telling you, that score is a very serious mark, because ask some of the towns. I can't think of the town now in Rockland County that was taken over by a monitor.
Well, I was in Mohawk.
So
I remember. I know
we've come down from about 32, 33, down to 24. Now we're down to like 11, 10.3, whatever it is, and we have no liability at all. We have no financial stress. We are in a great financial shape, And we're there not because we tax the hell out of our citizens. We're there because we're growing this budget by leaps and bounds.
Well, I said, because I'm from Yorktown, and we were building a lot of residential, and we finally got a supervisor that says, no, you got to attract business because that doesn't increase your school taxes. They're not
Right.
putting kids in the
Right.
system.
Right.
You know,
Well,
and 60% of your property taxes is your school taxes. So you've been
70.
attracting commercial business, which is where you're about increasing your tax base, I believe, is what you're talking about.
Right.
Now,
Expanding the total assessed valuation of the city.
right, without increasing the liability of services,
Right.
the dependence on services. Now, what I want to get to is that where in Yorktown he did it with a majority council of his party, you have done it as, like I call a minority mayor. You're a Republican, Democrats for Democrats.
Yeah.
And you've done something I know my supervisor could never do. You were able
You could
to
do it. It's not that hard.
Well,
I think you did.
you have the right personality. And
The budget
that's-
snafu helped a lot, I think.
What do you mean?
2 years ago, that vote you talked about earlier when the 5.9 went through. That
You have to, when you have the financial problems that we have, you
Right.
have to either cut services dramatically, or you have to.
You gotta
raise
pay the
taxes.
piper somehow.
You have to pay.
Right.
And I was not going to bond, and we're not going to defer. We're not going to exercise the pension deferrals. They did it my first year in office. That first budget, the 2015 budget. I'm sorry, the fiscal year 15 budget was adopted in 14, my first year. I inherited the 14 budget.
Right.
The 15 budget I voted against because it participated in pension deferral and it didn't raise taxes to pay for the services that we were expected to have. But what I do is I take that budget and then on January 1st we go into the department. I'm part of the administration. You know?
Wow. Who
I'm
knew?
not the legislation.
Who knew?
Believe it or not, I have a role at City Hall. I have an office there and everything. But we get the department heads together and we say, I know what your budget is on the approved budget, cut it 15%. And we start from day one and we watch every penny that they're monitoring. The council gets a report every quarter. I get a report every 30 days and I'm on them all the time. I'm on their case every week in every department watching those budgets.
Well, what I'm trying to point out
And we
is-
turned in surplus after surplus after surplus. Went from $7,500 to $3.6
no
million.
matter what happens in November, because I believe you're going to win. I've never had a doubt in my mind that you're going to win. But
Well,
no.
nothing's a
no matter
foregone
what,
conclusion.
Whatever happens, you're going to be still working with a majority registered Democrat.
registered is the key word.
You're right. That's not an easy trick to navigate this field.
Let me tell you something about party politics. I don't govern as a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an independent. I received the endorsement of the Independence Party. I do not believe that national party politics has any role on a local level.
I've written that many times, and Brian will attest to that.
There is no Republican or Democratic fire truck or ambulance.
Right.
When people get in a problem, they want to get caught. And they don't want to hear, oh, the Democrats wouldn't vote for another pumper truck. That's why we didn't have a pumper truck here for your fire. There is no Republican or Democratic snow or garbage.
you don't have a
people
printing
wake
press
up
at the
and
bottom
they
of
want
City
it
Hall
gone.
to
They
make
want
up the
they want the
difference.
garbage in their snow picked up, and it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. So when people come down at City Hall and they complain about this not being plowed or the street needs a repair, the sidewalk, the street light is out, those are things we have to address, and we don't check.
Let's talk about addressing this. For a long time, Pete, no. This is another feather in your cap coming up with a solution. And again, because I'm on the road all the time, I own a taxi company.
Right.
And Con Ed is digging up all the streets, laying out new gas lines. Can't fault them. I mean, you can't have gas lines exploding on you. They were old. And erring on the side of caution is not a bad thing.
Right.
Except they were quick to tear up the streets. They were not quick to repair the streets.
The streets are all repaired now.
Tell us how that came about. Because people were,
What you say is
see
exactly
social
correct.
media, I see it. People were bitching all the time about the conditions of the roads.
What you have to understand is that Con Ed isn't just a private company. They're a public utility. They have rights as almost as strong as a government has
Right.
rights. They have the right to raise taxes. They're governed by the Public Service Commission, but that's really a joke. They rubber stamp whatever the
Of course
utility
they do.
wants. Con Ed came in and they wanted to do a certain area of the city, replacing aged gas lines. They have to do it, and they do it. But they didn't want to repair the streets until everything was done and when they were ready. We had negotiated up at the boulevard to take over the paving job instead of them, because they only wanted to. We had just paved that street up at the boulevard,
that, and they tore it up.
and they wanted to repair the area that they dug up with a patch, and we didn't want that. So we asked them how much would they pay us to do the job ourselves, and with what we negotiated as a square foot or square yard or however they measured it, we could not only replace that strip, but we could go curb to curb in that whole section. So we went back, and I asked our city engineer and city attorney to contact Con Ed and see if we could negotiate that rate or even a better rate. And we would take over the paving ourselves, and then we could control the timeline that it gets done and the roads that got done. And not only were we able to repair all of the roads where Con Ed dug up, but we were able to extend it into our routine. Every year we have an amount in our budget to
All
repair
towns.
a certain
Yeah,
amount.
my town does the same thing, yeah.
You know, the engineer comes in with 20 or 30 streets listed, and we always take the top 15, the worst streets. And those are the ones that we address, and that's how we do it. So we got quite a bit done. I was just in Highland Park tonight walking. Those people are ecstatic about their streets.
Now,
Can I ask
Division Street and Main Street, that county or you?
County.
So, because I saw that with Division, they only did the part they dug up.
Yeah.
I had a customer that said, "Look at that! They didn't do the whole street."
Right.
I said, "That's your county saving
But they
tax
did it.
dollars."
They did a nice
They
stretch,
did,
though.
but still,
It's a nice job.
Still,
I just drove on it.
I agree,
Real
but-
quickly here, before we only have a couple
It
minutes.
looked chintzy.
I did an article yesterday in the Peekskill Post about an incident that happened at one of the volleyball games. Assault took place.
Right across the street from my house.
Okay, 2 men were injured with a baseball bat. That's, as of now, it's gotten about 6,000 views, that article, and a zillion comments. And a lot of the comments aren't addressing that specific issue, but they're addressing, and I know you've heard this before, the issue of volleyball games overall. And a lot of people are saying that there's a lot of alcohol use at these volleyball games, and there's gambling going on, and a couple posts talked about women of the night there. I want to get your take on that, if you know about that, if the city's looking into it. What are your reactions
Just
to
what
that?
I've been reading on the on some of the online stuff. I can tell you that when I first took office, there was an avalanche of complaints, especially up in the Constant Avenue, Nelson Avenue
I remember
area.
them, yeah.
Those areas. We passed legislation. We had the people in. We were going to issue parking permits for residents only. They didn't
Okay.
want that. But you know, we got very aggressive with law enforcement, and to a big extent, I think that we had addressed that problem. It is something now that we haven't received a lot of official complaints, but I read what's going on online,
Right.
and so it's something that may have started to creep back into the consciousness of the people. And if they start making complaints, I would say instead of publishing it online, write an email to the building department, the legal department, the city manager's office, or my office, and we'll take another look at that. We do have a strong law in the books. We took it from, I think, Ossining or one of the other towns,
I think it was Ossining.
and it was
Yeah.
a very tough law. We
Yeah.
adopted it, we enforce it, and it was very effective.
Okay,
So,
quickly, because the credits are rolling. Why should they vote for you in November? And your team?
proven experience, proven results, and the will and the willpower to go forward and complete the job.
Because apparently you don't take crap from anybody. I'll give you that much.
I
And
tell
as
you?
an executive, you're not supposed to.
What can I tell you?
That's a compliment, Frank.
The people have a way of working these things out.
I just know that you're so used to getting attacked, I don't know when you see a compliment coming anymore. Not taking crap is